Hello. I'm actually shocked to have one person on the call. I thought with the Easter weekend, everyone would already start getting into holiday mode. But welcome, Michaela. Just a little bit of updates, but I'll share it on our group chat as well. Your assignment 2 results will be released on the 22nd. I think that is Tuesday, if I'm not mistaken. So that will be released on Tuesday. So look out for that. You will see in all of your ICE tasks from 1 right down to 3, I've changed the due date to the 30th of May. So remember right at the beginning, I spoke about the fact that I'm giving you guys soft due dates for the ICE tasks, just so that you can pace yourself throughout the semester and, obviously completing your ICE tasks. But I am finding out that as we go more down the line, less people are sticking to the due dates. So what I've done is I've put a final due date for the 30th of May. However, I am not sure if that is final myself. Normally, we get told by faculty that your deadline for all CAS marks needs to be in by a certain date. They do give us roughly about 5 days or so to have it done. So I would urge you to get your ICE tasks done. At least you've got it over and done with. However, 30th of May is a final deadline. If faculty comes back and tells me it's actually sooner than that, I will communicate that it is sooner than that. Okay. All right. So we're moving on to our learning unit 5, theme 1. This is not going to be a very long session at all. You can see throughout the semester for the PACER, we're literally doing one theme per live lecture, which is great because then you can have everything sink in and we're not rushing too much in trying to complete everything. I do understand that the 1st of May is a public holiday. So I don't think I've included that in the PACER. So what I will do is either the week before that or the week after that, I will then complete that specific theme or learning unit, just so that we cover everything. In our last session, obviously, it will be like a revision session, which we can then, any questions that you have, etc., we'll then take it forward from this. Okay, give me 1 second. Okay, I'm back and I just want to share my screen quickly. Okay, so today's learning unit is based on sustainability, triple bottom line, as well as green supply chain or green logistics. Okay, so everything that works hand in hand with sustainability. We then obviously going to speak about that within your supply chain specifically. Okay. So the first one is we want to talk about what is sustainability within the supply chain. So firstly, we want to understand what is sustainability in general and not just within your supply chain. And basically what it is we want to make sure that basically the natural systems function, so we can produce everything that it needs to have a balance while we acknowledge human civilization. We take the resources to sustain our modern way of life. So a lot of businesses right now are moving the sustainability way, whether it is from a green manufacturing perspective or a recycling element. Businesses are steering more towards that angle because sustainability now, especially within a triple BEE element, it's now considering a portion in that. So whether a business has any sustainability policies, are they fulfilling those policies from a sustainability perspective? Whether you are working in a logistics environment, are you providing packaging that is recyclable, that can be reused? So these are sort of the elements that a lot of businesses are stemming towards, and it's basically what's going to help them, whether it is from a carbon emissions perspective or just a waste reduction. You want to have any sort of innovation or strategy design that forces you to have sustainability. Then we talk about what is sustainability in supply chain management. And in this regard, it is managing the material, the information, and the money, basically, as well as any cooperation between companies along the supply chain. So remember, this is your manufacturer, your retailer, your production house, your end customer, anybody that falls within your supply chain. Are they taking the three dimensions of triple bottom line? You know, is it economic? Are they environmentally friendly? Are they social? So we want to understand from that perspective, but we can only understand that if we can understand what triple bottom line is specifically. Okay. So when we talk about sustainability and triple bottom line, we need to first understand what is triple bottom line. So triple bottom line specifically is a framework. So as you can see, the framework on people, planet, and profit. It measures the business's success beyond your traditional financial matrix. So what is your revenue target? What is your profit target? What is your balance sheet? What is your cash flow? So it goes far bit beyond this information. And you're now looking at it from a social, environmental, and an economic perspective. So it's people, profit, planet. Okay, so people being social, profit being economic, and planet being environmental. So when we talk about people specifically, what are we talking about? It is basically your social impact of the business, whether it is your employees, your customers, or just the basic community that you operate in. It's considering your fair labor practices, community engagement. So are you doing sufficient CSR campaigns? Or are you ensuring that the business's operations don't negatively affect people's lives? So if you do have, let's say, for instance, a factory that's running in a specific residential area, is there carbon emissions that's released that at the end of the day impacts people's health? So you need to be also thinking about it from that perspective. When we look at it from a planet or an environment perspective, we want to understand what the environmental impact of the business activities are, whether it is how they use their resources, what is the waste generation, what is the pollution percentage that they're contributing towards, and what is their contribution to climate change. A lot of businesses indirectly don't know how they're contributing towards climate change, but this just brings about awareness. And a lot of businesses now are looking at triple bottom line as one of their, I would say, objectives or goals within their organization, just so that they're ticking all of their boxes. And then the last one is profit. So profit, we look at it from an economic perspective, and this is the financial bottom line. So whether it is the financial performance of the business, this is what we're looking at from a sustainability, because obviously the business needs to make money in order for everything else to fall into place. So when we consider the three sort of dimensions with triple bottom line, it basically helps businesses understand their impact and make more informed decisions that can balance out their economic, their social, as well as their environmental goals. So the TBL, so your triple bottom line, is used by businesses, non-profit organizations, and even government institutions to measure and improve their sustainability. So very important, sustainability with the three dimensions of triple bottom line: people, profit, planet, turns into social, economic, and environmental impact. Okay. Then we want to talk on a little bit on PDCA. So you'll see a lot of the concepts are now coming into play when we're looking at it from a sustainability perspective. And PDCA is what we consider a Deming cycle. It's a four-step process that pushes continuous improvement, pushes problem solving, in whether it's in business or whether it's in your everyday life. You can use PDCA if you're having a problem in your personal life as well. So how best can you problem solve, and how can you then continuously improve? So it basically starts with plan, do, check, and act. And it involves you identifying what the issue is, how you plan the solution around it, how you then implement your solution, and then you evaluate your results. So then you act on those specific findings on how best you can standardize the solution. So I know the textbook does try to overcomplicate it a lot, but I'm trying to uncomplicate it for you just so that you can understand how continuous improvement and how it speaks to sustainability as well. You want to be improving your business at all times, especially when it comes to from a financial perspective, economic perspective, and a social level. So we want to be able to, environmental level, we want to be able to understand where the problems are sitting in our business and how best we can mitigate it. So the first one is planning. So in this specific phase, the problem or the area for improvement is identified, and the plan is developed to then address it. It includes whether you are defining a goal, you're understanding what the current situation is, or you are developing any potential solutions for your specific problem. The do part of it is you want to put it into action. So the proposed solution is then implemented, typically from a pilot scale perspective, so that you can minimize the risk as much risk as possible. You obviously, if you're sitting with a bigger problem in your working environment, you don't want to do PDCA and then implement it on a wide scale. You want to implement it as different pilot projects in order to see the efficiency of the cycle. Okay, check the results of the implementation are examined. You also analyze the different results. And then you basically measure the impact of the changes and you compare them to the initial goals. So what your first goals were compared to what your new goals are, you're then going to compare the two to understand where you've changed or made changes and how it has affected your process just by making those changes. And then the last one, which is act, is based on the findings from the check stage. So your third stage, your decisions are made about whether to implement the solution completely and fully, and not just from a pilot perspective, what adjustments you need to make, or do you need to start the entire Deming cycle again with a new plan? If the changes are successful, then you can, standardize it into a sort of standardized process where you have an SOP basically around it. And once you have an SOP around it, you'll be able to understand the best way for you to go forward. So this particular cycle is quite powerful when we're looking at it from a continuous improvement perspective, because it encourages a business and an organization to have a structured approach to problem solving. You're not just going to wake up one day and decide you have a problem and then just materialize a solution. You need to follow a process. It also allows a lot of businesses to learn from their mistakes and refine their processes over time. So you want it to be as refined as possible, and implement if it works. Okay. Then we move on to something called green supply chain, or given different characteristics of it. So green logistics. So green supply chain was obviously formally introduced, and then green logistics came into play after the green supply chain was sort of already in note. And basically what this is putting in environmental thinking into the supply chain, whether it is how you design your product, how you are sourcing your raw materials or your different components, um, or how you are manufacturing it, or just how you're going to deliver your product. And then what is the end of life management for your product after it's been used by the consumer? Does it recycle? Can it be reused? What is the different considerations thereof? So we want to look at it as different elements of green manufacturing, or remanufacturing, when we look at it from a green supply chain perspective. So the first one we want to look at is reduction. So this is known as eco design, and it's giving the business an opportunity to redesign their supply chain strategy that promotes sustainability and environmental consciousness within the business. So you want to have as much sustainability initiatives to ensure that the costs incurred are for the the specific required goods, rather than for any unnecessary items. Okay, so you want to push as much as possible in terms of sustainability and environmental consciousness within your business. Then we want to talk about recycling. So this is also speaking about reverse logistics, and waste management. So there's various different categories when we're looking at it from a waste perspective. So the business needs to understand what is the disposal of that item, what is the different steps. So reverse logistics is when the product basically travels back into the supply chain, whether it's to be repaired, recycled, refurbished, returned, replaced, or refunded. So can we then recycle the item and use it again? And what sort of initiatives are we taking as a business to promote this sort of mindset with our customers, so that we can repurpose items and then sell it again? Okay. Then we want to look at remanufacturing. And basically, this process sees the revaluing of a product that has reached the end of its lifespan. The aim now is to integrate new components or new functions into the specific product that will see the item becoming viable on the market, but in a new way. So you want to remanufacture the product that you currently have so that it's considered to be a new product. So you're using existing product to remanufacture in order for you to create a new product instead of starting the process all over again. Inventory management, businesses basically need to make sure that only a certain volume or a certain quantity of inventory is kept, so that your cash is not tied up in that inventory that's sitting in the warehouse. So you need proper management of inventory, whether it's through tech like WMS systems or ERP systems, so that you have as much efficiency as possible. And then production scheduling as well as controlling. We want to identify the importance of having a good production planning process through scheduling your production process, basically to ensure that only the material that is required to be used is then being used, and the waste is being minimized or it's being disposed of in a responsible way. You also need as much control on the process once it's finished produced, or finish the production process, so you can basically understand the extent to which material or machinery or costs are being managed and the best way that it possibly is being managed. Okay, so that's basically understanding your green supply chain specifically and the different elements that go into it. Then we want to understand how we can develop a sustainable supply chain strategy, okay, which is very important because we need to know, when we're looking at it from a triple bottom line perspective, we know that there was a lot of awareness if we do have a problem, what is our different cycle in order for us to be better or to improve um, um, uh, uh, or from an environment, economic perspective and a social perspective. And then when we look at it from a PDCA perspective, how best way we can um, fix a problem that we basically have in our supply chain. So when we're looking at it from a different phase perspective, we want to start off with phase one, which is designing your sustainable supply chain strategy. So step one is you need to understand or assess your supply chain. Who are we? That's what you need to understand. So the focus here is to basically understand your strategy, your different sustainability practices, what is your capacity or how much can your supply chain hold, as well as the different resources that your supply chain is required in order for them to function. This will then assist you with understanding how best to mitigate the risks through understanding your different SWOT analysis. So whether it is what is your strength, your weakness, your different opportunities, what's your threat in the market or industry, so that you can have a corrected action plan, and you can basically improve your existing supply chain strategy. So during this step, you basically need to have a very holistic understanding of your strategy. So current strategy, you need to understand what that is. You also need to understand what is the goals, the vision, the mission statement of your specific business. Because you can then go into a remanufacturing or a re-engineering phase, and you need to have as much efficiency and accuracy as possible within your business. Then we look at step two. You need to assess the environment. So what is basically changing in the environment? So this basically looks at various factors that have the ability to have an impact on your operations, in whether it's a short term or long term, whether it's financially, socially, environmentally, etc. So you need to break this down, and you need to understand and assess the impact that the inputs have in your supply chain. So whether it is your raw materials, your labor, your capital, your shareholders, uh, different fuel prices, currency instability, different economic pressures like the inflation rate, those sort of things. All of these need to be closely monitored for volatility and understand where you're sitting in the market so that you can assess what is changing and how the change is going to affect you specifically. So in this step specifically, the tool that a business can make use of is what we call scenario planning. And it's basically a simulation. And simulation tools are great for businesses because it allows you to create an illusion or an indication of where you're sitting at from a business and how the potential change that you're looking at can impact the business. So you want to do a scenario planning or a simulation based on any sort of forecasted data, and understand how certain inputs in basically reacts with each other, and you want to understand from a current and a potential and a future requirements that from a stakeholder perspective how it's associated with the supply chain. So you're running simulations in like step two. Step three, you want to evaluate. So how do we specifically fit? So based on like steps one and two specifically, an understanding of the supply chain as well as the environment that they are, sitting in or featured in, you need to understand the risk, you need to understand the opportunities so that you can also do a little bit of a SWOT analysis, and you can use an evaluation framework so you can understand the different relationships that can be established within your specific business without disrupting the flow of your operation specifically. Step 4, we want to adjust the supply chain strategy. So how should we fit? So when we're looking at it from a step 3, we want to have the findings of what our threats are or our opportunities are. So remember, threats and opportunities, we look at it from an external environment perspective. Strengths and weaknesses, we look at it from an internal environment. They will allow the business to be able to understand if there's any gaps in their policies and understand how sustainability can best feed into their current supply chain. So the more gaps that's identified, the greater the need to basically make changes to the strategy. And obviously, the smaller the gaps, you now, try to weigh off what's the cost versus the sustainability strategy theory. You want to understand, if there is large gaps, there's obviously more room for implementing changes, implementing some redesigned policies in your supply chain, and you kind of have a timeline for specific programs that will be outlined. Some of the different characters within your supply chain process are internal members, so whether it is your internal staff, they can contribute to the whole end-to-end supply chain situation. Then we move on to our phase 2, which is integrating the supply chain strategy into our business. So step 5 is operationalization. And it's how do we get there? How do you now put this plan basically together? So despite there being threats, despite there being opportunities, as well as a sustainability supply chain process or program being identified, because we obviously saw that there's large gaps in the market, there might be a little bit of shortcomings when we're implementing the strategy, because we want to be able to balance out the 3 dimensions of triple bottom line. So whether it's economic, environment, or social objectives. So these must be taken into consideration. And we need to find a balance within the 3. So you can't have where you are speaking too much to social, but it's costing you a lot of money, or you're speaking too much to environment and you're not speaking to your people. So everything needs to have a balanced scorecard, and you need to find what objectives are part of that sustainable supply chain and what is the different measurements that go into it, whilst you basically are integrating or implementing your new strategy. And then the last one, step 6, is your implementation phase. So your final step is implementation of the strategy together with your sustainable supply chain sort of balance scorecard. But you're doing this more from a strategic level. So any gaps, all of these things will assist in developing an implementation plan, which gets done in step 6. We need to be able to move in the right directions, identify any gaps, take corrective action, because you now need to incorporate any sustainability strategies. You need to have, small corporate social responsibility initiatives, and you need to be able to drive a more sustainable supply chain. So this is basically your 6 steps in 2 different phases of how best to design or develop a sustainable supply chain. So we use this concurrently with triple bottom line and the 3 dimensions thereof. We speak a lot about having a gap analysis and a balanced scorecard on the 3 dimensions. So it's not costing us a whole lot of money, but it's not ticking the other boxes. Everything needs to be balanced, and the balanced act comes into play when we are going through the 6-step process, basically. Okay, and that's basically our theme 1 for Learning Unit 5. Next week, we will go over theme 2, and then The following week, as I said, is the 1st of May, which is a public holiday. I don't think a lecture is not on your calendar. So I will incorporate that either into next week's session or the week after. I'll just see where it makes sense. All right. As I mentioned, I already spoke about ICE tasks. Sort of final due date is the 30th of May, but if there's any changes from faculty regarding CAS, then I'll change that for you. I'll give you sufficient time to have it done. And then your assignment 2 results will be posted on the 22nd of April, which is Tuesday. And yeah, maybe we can do a quick NSS session on Thursday for like the first 10-15 minutes, just so that I can explain to you sort of like where you went wrong or where you went right, you know, the good, the bad, the ugly, basically. Okay. And that's it from me. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful Easter weekend. And I will chat to you next week, Thursday.
Thanks so much, Narissa. Appreciate it.
Okay, bye.